Hello and welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
And we are
the FAIRtax Guys.
As excited as I have been in a long time, a huge announcement here, folks.
Yeah, this is great. Go ahead, Bob.
FAIRtax Nation, which is another grassroots fair tax organization nationwide, is going to have a presence, has got a booth at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Committee, which is going to be meeting in February up in a D.C. suburb up in Maryland. And the FAIRtax Guys are going to CPAC as a guest of the FAIRtax Nation. We will be broadcasting live on Spreaker and probably doing some Facebook Live as well from up there on the 21st through the 24th of February. Aside from the fact that I'm going to freeze myself to death, that is going to be a fun trip.
You can wear a sweater, Bob. We'll find a sweater with a FAIRtax logo on it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Oh,
yeah.
But I'll tell you what, the FAIRtax, of course, it is nonpartisan. It's non-ideological.
That's
There's
right.
something in there that everybody likes, but so far most of the support for the FAIRtax has come from the right side of the aisle, and we're just pleased as punch to be invited up there to broadcast live from CPAC, and I am looking forward to that. I want to snag some folks like Sean Hannity and Mark Levin and ask them how come they're not on board with this thing the way Neil Bortz was.
Yeah, exactly. I listen to these guys every once in a while, and one thing that really rankles me is when they mention the fair tax and the flat tax in the same phrase. Not only in the same sentence, but almost in the same breath, giving people who don't know the difference the idea that the fair tax and the flat tax are the same. They're not. I mean, if you've been listening to FAIRtax Power Radio, there's a huge difference between the flat tax and the fair tax. There's just no comparison. The flat tax is still an income tax, and it still maintains the IRS.
And it won't stay flat.
No, and it won't stay
We've
flat.
seen that before.
No, and we're going to get to that, too, because we've got an update in a little while on the number of proposals to change the tax code submitted by Congress already.
We've noted as well, that there seems to be just a stone wall. That none of the punditry, none of the Congress people, nobody during the tax reform debate that just concluded here not long ago was mentioning the fair tax. Why was nobody talking about it? I want to go to CPAC and ask some folks and get the answers.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So we're very grateful to Marilyn Rickard for inviting us to her FAIRtax Nation booth. We'll be set. We're not sure if we're going to be set up at the booth or in broadcast row, or maybe both. We can spend time in both.
We'll see.
And but we're very excited to be able to be.
Keep an eye on the Facebook page. That's where we'll put the latest updates for you.
Yeah. We'll keep you posted. But yeah, Bob and I are both very excited at this opportunity because we need to get the word out on the fair tax. Just because the House and Senate have agreed on a plan and the president has signed it, doesn't mean that the fair tax is going away. And that is going to be the thrust of this episode.
That leads into what we want to talk about today, because the politicians, we've seen this coming for months, that they would tweak the edges, they rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic, as we've been saying, and pat themselves on the back about this huge, significant, monstrous tax reform that they have delivered to everybody, then go on their merry way and say, oh, we've already done that, we're not going to mess with tax reform anymore. Yeah. That is why we, the fair tax people of the country, have got to keep the pressure on these guys.
Yep.
Let them know it is not over. There is so much in the new proposal that the president signed not long ago that doesn't change than does. We still have an income tax. We still have the IRS. The one that galls me the most, we still have withholding. The government still insists that we feed the government before we feed our families. That hasn't changed. Just so much. The evasion has not, what they did is not going to touch the evasion problem at all, which is $1 billion a year problem and getting worse. So there is so much about this great tax reform that they signed not long ago that does not change the current system and leaves all of the bad stuff in place. And that's why we, the fair tax folks of the nation, are going to stay on these folks, and we need you to do that as well.
Yep. And let's back up a little bit and put a historical perspective to tax reform,
do it.
Quote unquote tax reform. I've got a few articles here that are going to help us do that. This one is from April of 1996. So, we're going back a little bit in time here. And this is from the Joint Economic Committee, Congress of the United States. It's one of their committees, okay? And they're talking about the title is The Reagan Tax Cut, Lessons for Tax Reform. If you remember your history, Ronald Reagan won the election in 1980. He was sworn in 1981 and proceeded to get some tax reductions, significant tax reductions. The highest marginal tax rate was up in the 70s, 70-something. He got it cut down to like 50, and he did some other things. They called it the Economic Recovery Tax Act. And it was a 25% across the board cut in personal marginal tax rates. Now, you'll recognize this sentence here. I'm not going to read the whole thing, obviously. Opponents used static revenue projections to argue that the ERTA would be a giveaway to the rich because their tax payments would fall. Folks, it's been 37 years since the Reagan tax.
You think they've come up with a new talking point in 37 years, but they can't.
So, 37 years and the message is still the same. Okay, but anyways, it must be working for some of the people, and they're worried about that. And of course, they're wrong, as this article will point out. Down a little farther, it says, high marginal tax rates discourage work effort, savings, and investment, promote tax avoidance and evasion. Now, let's point out, it's okay to avoid taxes if you're doing it legally. In other words, using the tax law to lessen your tax burden. For instance,
hire yourself a lobbyist and get yourself a loophole you can use.
But, take the standard deduction. I mean, you have the option of taking the standard deduction or not. Nobody in their right mind is going to forget the standard deduction. Oh yeah, I want to pay more taxes. No, we're going to take the standard deduction and legally reduce our tax burden. So if you're doing it legally within the tax laws, there's nothing wrong with that. You should be encouraged to do that. Evasion is another problem. Evasion is illegally not paying what you're supposed to be paying. And that's a huge problem. Yeah, and even back then.
Under-reporting income and over-reporting credits and deductions and stuff. Yeah. And that's the problem with the system that relies on folks telling the government what they're making.
Yeah, right.
Of course,
trust me.
they have ways to try to back that up a little bit. But we have said before, you could not design a more error-prone, more fraud-prone system if you tried than the current income tax that we've got, which is one of the huge reasons it needs to be replaced.
Yep, and the current evasion rate points that out. Okay, continuing on with this report, the economic benefits of the ERTA were summarized by President Clinton's Council of Economic Advisors in 1994. Quote, it is undeniable that a sharp reduction in taxes in the early 80s was a strong impetus towards economic growth. Okay, so lowering taxes on people encourages them to work more and spend more, which means more taxes are collected. All right, in 93, the Clinton tax increase appears to have the opposite effect on the willingness of the wealthy taxpayers to expose income to taxation. In other words,
big surprise there.
Yeah. You increase the tax rates, people find ways of diminishing their tax burden. Again, if you're doing it legally, if you're using the tax code, the many different deductions and exemptions that are written into the tax code, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay. Okay, and then finally I love this part here. The Reagan tax cuts, similar to measures enacted in the 1920s and the 1960s, showed that reducing excessive tax rates stimulates growth, reduces tax avoidance or evasion, and can increase the amount and share of the tax payments generated by the rich. So the 1920s, the 1960s, the 1980s with Reagan and so forth, and now 2017. All right, so my prediction is that, because I know if you watch on TV, there are all kinds of dire projections about this tax plan. And yes, we are going to talk about the fair tax, but the current tax plan that was recently signed by the president, in my own analysis, and believe me, remember, I'm a retired chemistry teacher. I'm not an economics professor. But I think it's going to be a boost to the economy. I think reducing taxes and letting money come back from overseas by reducing the repatriation tax is going to be a boon. So we'll see. We'll see.
I say we've seen this before. That's what happened in the 60s. That's what happened in the 80s.
Yeah.
But then what happened immediately thereafter? The lobbyists and the special interests got their grubby little paws back on it again, and it became just a temporary, relief at best. Yeah. And that's what's going to happen here. It is going to help. It's going to help in the short run. But the lobbyists are, I think it was Politico the other day, was using kind of the same language that you've been saying, that it was a huge Christmas present to the tax lobbyists.
Absolutely. I think I got that report in here. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
So it's not going to stay like it is. It's going to help for a while. Then it's just going to devolve back. You've got to get rid of the whole system if we're going to make it real tax reform.
Yeah, Reagan had some tax
we
cuts.
Need to stay on everybody.
Reagan had some tax cuts in 81, but in 86, and during his second term, they completely rewrote the tax code. Unfortunately, they stayed with an income tax in the IRS. And it is now almost 3 times larger than it was when they finished with it in 86. I mean, that's a good lesson right there. All right, I got another report here. This is from BusinessInsider.com. An economics professor turned small business owner breaks down his big 3 big problems with the GOP tax plan. This is dated December 21st, so it's just a couple of weeks ago. All right. Tim Wolf, a Jimmy John's franchisee, says the Republican tax plan doesn't help small business owners. Ooh, that's kind of a sweeping statement. But I did notice that there was more of a tax reduction for large businesses, but the small businesses such as S-corps and partnerships, they got less of a break. You know, their tax rate is still higher.
Could it be the fact that they can't afford the big high-priced lobbyists?
Yeah, that
are
might
spreading campaign cash around D.C.
That's right.
Just saying, you know.
Wolf, a former economics professor, says the tax bill lacks measures to boost labor productivity, which he identifies as the most important driver of U.S. economic improvement. So he wants the tax code to boost labor productivity. Why are we still doing this?
Why are you taxing labor productivity if you want that to increase?
Yeah, so, I mean, a couple more sentences here. Says, to that end, Wolf is most concerned with the expensing of equipment, interest on debt, and the tax cut being offered to S-corps and partnerships. And like I said, S-corps and partnerships did not get as much of a tax break as the very large mega corporations. And it's just like Bob said, they don't have the lobbyists. So Wolf is a Republican, but he says he keeps his politics out of his economic analysis, which regularly include written contributions to trade publications and local outlets. So the guy's an economics professor turned businessman, and obviously, he knows from that perspective, what he's talking about. Now, here's a report that's kind of scary, at least to Bob and I. All right, this is from Politico, dated December 20th, again, a couple weeks ago, and it's called Tax Reform Flaws Build the Case for a New Consumption Tax. Oh, wait a minute.
Now, that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, the headline sounds good. New consumption tax. Oh, yeah, okay. This is by David Rogers, and like I said, December 20th. Is the real reason from tax reform that Americans rely too much on the income to fund their government?
Yes, they do.
Time and again, that box has proven too small a revenue pot to do all that it's asked by the tax writers. Well, you could cut spending, but
yes,
anyways.
And you could close a lot of the evasion.
Yeah.
If you cut spending and you got rid of the evasion, if you had a system that would get rid of the evasion. Of course, the cutting spending is beyond the scope of any tax code.
Yeah, that's right.
How they spend it is entirely different debate, and the fair tax doesn't address that at all. But yeah, if you could just do that. Get rid of the evasion, and the shortfall goes away by a dramatic amount.
And so going on here in this article, listen to this. Most other industrial nations lighten the load on their income tax by combining it with some form of consumption taxes.
Red flag,
yeah.
Red flag,
Whoa.
Red flag.
Yeah, get your red flags right here. That's a terrible idea. The people in D.C. love it. And it goes on to quote Ben Cardin, who's a senator from Maryland. And if you remember in past FAIRtax Power Radios, we talked about Ben Cardin. Steve Hayes has met him. Steve Hayes is the president of our national group. And Ben Cardin put forth a plan which combined a sales tax and an income tax. I mean, I'm sure he thinks it's a great way to, lessen the burden, but you know what happens. I mean, what's going to happen if you give Congress an income tax and a sales tax?
That means they've got both hands in your pockets instead of just one.
Yeah, that's a terrible idea. And because we know Congress cannot control themselves.
Which is why the fair tax demands that the 16th Amendment be repealed.
Yeah, that's right.
The original framers knew that the income tax was a bad idea. It was unconstitutional up until they passed the 16th Amendment. And the fair tax is not going to allow the income tax to come back after the fair tax is implemented, because if you don't get rid of the 16th Amendment, then the fair tax goes away.
Yep.
And I've got a feeling that if they ever could get the fair tax in, the 16th Amendment would be repealed in record time.
Oh, yeah.
Because folks would love not having their withholding, not having payroll taxes, bringing home the full gross amount of their paycheck, getting a prebate I don't know anybody that would not like to get a check from the government every month. Family of four, a little over $600 at last. Of course, they're going to revise those figures here before too much longer. But why would anyone want the old system back when there are so many good things in the new one? So the 16th Amendment will be gone in a heartbeat if the fair tax can ever take hold and people can actually see how it works.
And when it comes to that, to repealing the 16th Amendment, if we just tell them the 16th Amendment repeals the IRS. The IRS is a universally hated organization in this country. You just tell them that, it'll be done in days, not months or years.
Okay.
Okay, the last article here is from Politico. It's dated January 2nd, which was yesterday, as we're recording this. Okay? There are winners and losers in every major tax overhaul, and Washington lobbyists appear to be among the winners.
Big surprise there.
Yeah. Rather than streamlining the tax code, Republicans have made it more complicated by jamming through a new series of temporary tax breaks for everything from craft brewers to orange growers. And it goes on to talk, lobbyists expect these breaks, known as tax extenders, to generate paydays for years. So this is all about the lobbyists, apparently.
Oh. I wonder how many people actually read the entire bill before they passed it.
Oh, boy. Well, I didn't. So this is, but I'm not surprised by this. Now, and the word temporary, that's, so there's some temporary tax breaks, okay?
They tried to explain that away by saying that, they had to make them temporary to get through that. There's some convoluted rules in the Senate. Well, if they were going to do this through reconciliation, so they really had to twist this thing into a pretzel to get it through the Senate under reconciliation, where they, didn't need to get 60 votes to get it through.
Yeah, and some of these tax extenders, they're even shorter than that. Okay, let's see. President Donald Trump said this was a giant Christmas present to the American people. Well, according to this other fellow, it's a giant present to the tax lobbying community as well because of the extenders. Now get this. Craft brewers, for instance, are already gearing up to preserve their $4.2 billion tax break that expires at the end of 2019. So they're getting a tax break that only lasts for 2 years. And they're already gearing up to lobby Congress not to eliminate that tax break for them. So here it is, the beginning of 2018, and they're gearing up to do, to work next year to not lose that tax break. And the point behind all this, why am I talking about all these tax breaks?
Yeah, why are you talking about all that? Would you like to explain that to the folks?
Well, it's kind of like in the old saying, one thing about beating your head against the wall is it feels good when you stop.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, so for decades, we have been beating our head against the wall with the income tax. I mean, all this stuff I read, all this wrangling about the income tax and static scoring as opposed to dynamic scoring, and it's a tax break for the rich, and the brewers are getting this tax break, and these people are getting that tax break, but it's going to expire then, so they have to hire lobbyists and all this stuff. All of this is completely unnecessary. I know it keeps a number of people employed, but it's completely unnecessary.
Oh. And it drives me nuts. It does. I don't like feeding the government before I feed my family. That is just, philosophically wrong.
So we have...
and the golf lobby is stronger than the bowling lobby. I don't like that either.
Well, so far they haven't been. Neither one has been successful that I know of. All right. Okay.
I had
now,
to get that in on you.
tax proposal scorecard. Now, you folks know, if you listen to us on a regular basis, we do a regular update on how many tax proposals have been submitted. But let's
now,
go.
You would think that if they got their big tax reform through, that there would be no more monkeying with the tax code.
Yeah.
You would be wrong.
Let's go back to January 1st of 2017. Okay,
That was
just
when
about a year
Congress
ago.
first convened.
Yeah, and that's the beginning of the 115th Congress, and of course, on January 1st, there were 0 tax proposals. Now, fast forward to the beginning of December. All right, in 11 months, our Congress critters had submitted 1,088 proposals to change the tax code. That's up to the beginning of last December. December 14th, that's the day that the House passed their tax reform plan. It was up to 1,110 tax proposals. All right? December 20th, that's when the House and the Senate agreed on the same plan. That's only 6 days later. 10 more proposals. It's now up to 1,120 proposals to change the tax code. And then the 23rd, when the president signed the plan and it became law, 1,126. And today, the figure is
1,129.
So almost every day, or at least every week, tax proposals to change the tax code are being submitted by members of Congress, even while they're working on this tremendous tax reform plan that was just passed. So what does that tell you, folks?
That tells you that the people aren't looking, but we're looking out for them.
Yeah. And it tells you that the tax code, as long as it's an income tax, will never stay the same from one day to the next. Now, granted, those are proposals, and they're not all going to become
get through, but a lot of them will.
Yeah, a lot of them will, yeah. And they will make our tax code more complicated, just like that one article in Politico. They've made the income tax more complicated by, these things. So what is the solution, and what are we going to do about it?
The solution is the fair tax.
That's right.
And what are we going to do about it? We are going to encourage as many people as we can to join AFFT. That's the number one thing you can do. Go to fairtax.org and join AFFT. Go to bigsolution.org and hook up to become a worker in your local area as well. And we were talking with a guy on the phone last night. There's another way that you can support AFFT, and that's through Ebates.
That's right.
How many of you use the Ebates, E-B-A-T-E-S, Ebates website, which is where you log on to you get an account there on Ebates, then you log on to that website, and from there you launch off to Amazon or wherever else you want to do some online shopping. And the fact that you came through the Ebates website, anything you buy on the site that you go to, you end up getting a little bit of kickback to it. And they have got it figured out now that if you would so like to just donate your Ebates kickback. I mean, that's not really money that you have in hand. It's just stuff that accumulates in your Ebates account. If you would like to donate that to AFFT, there's a way to do it.
Yeah,
so you can help AFFT just by shopping.
This is brand new because, remember, we used to talk about FairtaxRewards.com. Well, a month or so ago, but probably longer than that, I noticed their website wasn't working when I went there because I used it on a regular basis.
Yes, you need a new printer, don't you?
Yes, that's right. Now I need, but a while back we needed a new dishwasher and whatever, I would try. Well, make sure you go to FairTax Reward. Well, the website stopped working. I don't know what happened, but that was the same idea. Ebates, you've seen it on TV, you've heard about it. It's a much bigger system, and yes, you can use it with Amazon and all kinds of places. So this is a great way of supporting the AFFT. Which, we need to do that if we're going to get real tax reform, because we have to continue promoting the fair tax. Just because they have a new tax plan and it's got some rate reductions, and yes, I think it will help the economy, but we've seen what's happened before. The Reagan tax plan from 86 to now, 32 years later, the tax code has exploded wildly, and there's Yeah, nothing's going to stop that.
Well, I know what's going to happen here. We've been predicting this for months, that once some kind of tax reform got through, that the Congress critters are to go into, we've already checked that box mode, don't bother us with tax reform anymore. That's why it is more critical than ever right now, in the wake of this new system that just came in, that FAIRtax folks continue to let their Congress people know, you didn't get the job done, folks. You just rearranged the deck chairs on the Titanic. We want real tax reform. Keep the pressure on Congress. Do not let them say, all right, we've already been there. That box is checked. We're going to move on to something else. Keep it on them.
Yep.
Which means go to PopVox and tell them about you like the FAIRtax. You can do that. Phone calls, personal visits to Congressman's office. Show up at their town halls as well. But do not let the fact that something got through and the Congress critters are going to want to change their direction, change their attention to something else. Don't let them do it. They work for you.
That's right.
You okay?
Sorry. Yeah.
Took a big slug of water there and it just about came back, didn't it?
Yeah, and that is water, honest. Anyways, and some of the tools you use, all right, because Bob is absolutely right. You're going to get the message, we've already done tax reform. No, you did some tax changes. You did not reform the tax code. Look up reform in the dictionary. It doesn't say change a couple of levels, okay? Mm-hmm. So, my gosh, we're getting to the end of the program here already.
Yes.
Wow. But anyways, remember, evasion is a huge problem that nobody in Washington seems to want to recognize, but it's there. I mean, in 2017, the evasion was $693 billion, or about, another way of looking at it, was about 21%. About 21% is not being collected that should be collected. And that's like 1 in 5 people not paying their taxes. Mm-hmm. This is a serious problem. And there is research behind this. You can find this on the FAIRtax website down at the bottom. You scroll down to the bottom, and there's a link for the summary of the evasion study that was completed last spring. So that's one of your tools. And what Bob and I just talked about with all the constant proposals to change the tax code, that's another one of your tools. Don't let these people get away with this. So,
okay. But also continue to thank your congressperson and your senators if they are co-sponsors, but make sure that just co-sponsoring the legislation, H.R. 25 or S18, just being a co-sponsor is not enough, because we've got a lot of folks up there who have their name on it, but they really aren't pushing it. Make sure that your congressperson is committed to it and is willing to do more than just say, okay, I'll co-sponsor this, and then go on their merry way and not pay it any more attention.
Yeah. And
so again, Congressman Yoho, thank you for your efforts on behalf of the FAIRtax. We're not talking about you here.
Yeah, so let's keep up the pressure, because they have not done real tax reform. We need real reform in the near future, so we have to keep the pressure on them. Again, another shout out to our friends at FAIRtax Nation for inviting us to accompany them to CPAC. Bob and I are very, very excited about that.
Oh, yeah.
It's a great opportunity.
We'll do a Facebook Live from up there. We'll be putting information on our Facebook page as to exactly when and where. We'll have to figure out what time of day we'll be able to go on and for how long we'll be able to go on. And depending on, I would love to be able to horse collar Mike Huckabee and just talk to him forever.
That would be great.
That would be really good. So do that as well.
And that's what we were told. These folks walk right by the booth every time, so we can go out and snag them.
All right.
Legally, yeah.
It's not, well, actually, what we're going to do, we're going to bring our secret weapon.
Yeah.
Your wife, Elaine, is going to be prowling the halls up there.
That's right.
And she is really good at corralling somebody and just say, you need to go over there. You know?
Yep.
That's one of her
that's
talents,
one of her strengths.
Sure.
Yep.
And real quick, we haven't given her email address yet. thefairtaxguys@gmail.com if you'd like to send us an email. And it can be 2 pages, single-spaced if you like. Of course, leave us a comment, like our Facebook page as well. And we'll be doing our Facebook Live from CPAC for sure.
Yeah, we got to do one this month. We haven't figured out when.
I'm not sure we can get that done, because we're going to have to record a couple of episodes here, because I'm going to be out of town here for too much longer. We've got to get ahead. But we'll be doing that. Keep your eye on our Facebook page for that as well. But we sure appreciate it all. And that's going to wrap it up for this edition of FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Molero.
The FAIRtax Guys, reminding you that the FAIRtax is America's big solution. And once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
FAIRtax is coming. Don't stand in the way. FAIRtax is coming across the U.S.